So this afternoon, we will listen to a 30-minute conversation between Professor Eric Atmore and Lauren van Niekerk as they discuss Eric's book on the lessons he's learned over the years leading a non-profit organization. Lauren is a former colleague of Eric's at the Center for Early Childhood Development and the University of Cape Town, where she is a lecturer in the Department of Social Development and is currently completing her PhD studies. She holds a Bachelor of Social Science in Social Work, an honors degree in Social Policy and Management, and a master's degree in Social Planning and Administration from the University of Cape Town. Her research interests are early childhood development and father involvement in the early years. Now, Eric has given me strict instructions not to sing and not to introduce him today, but I will only be honoring the first instruction. Eric holds a master's in social policy and management from the University of Cape Town and a PhD in education policy studies from the University of Stellenbosch, where he is also extraordinary professor in the Department of Education Policy Studies. He's worked in the non-profit sector for 45 years, 30 of which have been dedicated to running the multi-award-winning Center for Early Childhood Development. In 2022, Eric was named one of the top 100 most influential academics in government across the globe. And I'm going to stop there before I get into any more trouble. After the interview, there will be 15 minutes for questions from the floor, and then I'll come back to wrap up the proceedings, after which the book will be distributed free of charge. So please make sure to get your copy before you leave. Claire and Teresa are at the back, and they'll be distributed. Okay, Lauren and Eric, over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. It's a pleasure to be here today to celebrate Prof Eric Atmore at the launch of his book, Leading Non-Profit Organizations, Lessons Learned Over the Years. And today we've got the privilege of speaking with Eric, a highly respected leader in the non-profit space, and the visionary behind Center for Early Childhood Development. His work has had a profound impact on early childhood development in the non-profit sector. And this book serves as a powerful reflection of his experiences, his insights, and the lessons learned over the years while leading one of the most well-run organizations in the country. So today our conversation is going to explore what inspired this book, key takeaways from non-profit leaders, or for non-profit leaders, and the journey of writing and sharing these 105 lessons. And after our discussion, we'll open the floor for some questions and answers, so you can start thinking about a few questions you might have a little bit later. So with that, please join me in welcoming Prof Eric. Okay, so Eric, you've had an extensive career, as you were saying, in the non-profit sector. Before we get into the details of the book, can you share with us a little bit more about your journey and what ultimately led to you putting these experiences into writing?
Okay, Lauren, thank you very much. For extensive career, Lauren actually meant old. She's just too kind and gentle to say it. I started off working in Bishop Davis as a community worker with gangs and young people, and spent 3 years there. And in fact, one of the activists at the time is sitting in the audience here, Frank Judy. Frank, where's your hand? Frank, where are you? No, he's gone to the bathroom or something, but Frank was one of those activists. So I spent 3 years at the Foundation for Social Development, working with young people in gangs, and we had an early childhood development center, then called a preschool, in the project. And after 3 years I got a position as director of the Lady Buxton Children's Centre in Claremont. You know, as you go up Bowood Road, and spent 7 years there as director, and was part of a group of 3 early childhood centres that decided at that point to integrate racially. And the other 2 was the Mulberry Bush in Rondebosch, which some people may know, and Villa Maria in Tumblers Kloof. We took a decision that we will admit children regardless of the colour of their skin. We got clamped down upon, told we were subversive, communistic, and that the white children's language ability and thinking would be diminished because there were children of other backgrounds there. I then moved on and was recruited by Grassroots Educate Trust, and the director and the chairperson of the board are sitting in front here, and spent 7 years at Grassroots as well, which in itself was a huge learning experience. And then in 1993, 1994, myself, the late Professor Daniel Pleitjes, and Ros Witboy, who's also sitting here. Where, Ros, were you? Oh, right in the corner. We, in anticipation of the coming democratic environment, democratic government, we decided to start a non-profit which would excel in the field. Fast forward 30 years later, we're sitting here, and I've worked with Ros for 37 years. How she's tolerated that, I do not know. At our 30th birthday party a few months ago, Michaela Ashby Cooper, in a public platform, called me insane. And I did not disagree with her. To run a non-profit today, as Marodia will attest to, there needs to be a little bit of insanity. So that's the path which got me to this point. As to why I wrote this book, I think 4 decades of practice, I've learned a hell of a lot. Probably more about what not to do than what to do. And in each of those learning experiences, new things were learned. New things were taught to me. And I thought, let me put this together in an easy to read, slightly tongue-in-cheek and slightly cynical format. So there are 105 lessons, but each lesson takes about a minute to read. And as you read through it, in each of those there's a pointed message coming across. And that's the background, and that was the motivation.
Thanks, Eric. So you said obviously there have been moments over the course of your career which have sort of created these lessons and carved out these lessons. What inspired you to write the book now? Was there a particular moment or a particular challenge that made you think, I need to write this book now?
Yes, the situation of non-profits in South Africa is dire. And that was before Donald Trump performed these idiotic acts. Working in the non-profit sector is tough. Non-profits are in difficulties. They're closing every single day. In the sector we work in the early childhood sector, about 90 non-profits have closed in the past 2 decades. Most of them will say they're closed for financial reasons. I differ with that. I think the reason they have closed is because of poor leadership and poor strategy. Yes, not having the funds is the straw that breaks the camel's back. And that's the tipping point, so to speak, the edge over which they fall. But many, many organizations are appallingly run. I'll give you an example. I had a meeting with a nonprofit about 5-6 days ago. And this guy is responsible now for the fundraising and financial survival of the organization. So I asked him, what is your annual budget? He didn't know. I asked him, do you have a 3-year rolling budget which reflects what your costs are going to be? And his answer was no. And I asked him about the staffing. The CEO is hardly ever there. the center is inherently dysfunctional. And if we look at the non-profit database, there are about 260,000 registered non-profits across the country. 260,000. I believe that the real number of functioning centers is probably more in the region of 8 to 10,000, because it's the easiest thing in the world to start a non-profit in this country. You need a constitution that you can download off the internet, you need to get it signed, and you submit it, and you're a registered non-profit. So I think the sector is in crisis, and they're living from hand to mouth. You know, I'll talk later, and I'll talk in the book about, if you're responsible for a non-profit, you should at least have 12 to 18 months of funding in your bank accounts before your programs begin. And the trend or the pattern seems to be, we raise our funding on the run and we raise it as we need it. Now for me that's short-sighted, because all you need is a Donald Trump type of action, or a government which is going to raise VAT by 2% and take money off social services. And then you won't be around anymore. And as I say, there are 80 to 90 non-profits that have closed just in our sector in the past 2 decades. In the early days, it was the one man and a fax machine size organization that closed. Today, it's the much, much bigger ones. And there are really big non-profits that have closed down that should never have closed. And the implication is that children get fewer services. So the reason for writing the book is to transfer some of the lessons that have been learned the hard way, because we haven't always had it easy. These wrinkles are not here for any other reason than 12, 15, 18 hours a day. And Ros will testify to that when she gets emails at 2 a.m. in the morning from me asking for something. So that's the reason.
Right. Now, I'd say that every book, or generally speaking, books carry a central theme or message. If there's one key message that you want NPO leaders and organizations to take away from this book, what would it be?
I think it will be, do what's right, do the proper things, work towards your big ambition, follow the law. There's a local newspaper where last week the front page headline was, NPO needs funds to stay alive. Now, I did an exercise, what are the 4 or 5 headlines that I never want to see about the Center for Early Childhood Development? And some of the ideas that came up was, I never want to see in the Cape Times or in the Cape Argus or on Daily Maverick, NPO director steals funds. But we see it weekly. I don't want to see fraud found at NPO. We see it regularly. I don't want to see board member accused of gender-based violence. We see it in the press. And I don't want to see non-profit organization trainer makes racist comments. But we see it in the press. So I think the key message is, do the simple things, but do them right. Think strategically, build a good culture in your organization, and you will thrive. The other point I'm trying to make in the book is, if you're a field worker, you have to focus on the week and the month ahead. If you're a manager of a program, you have to focus on 6 months to a year ahead. If you're the director, and Glenda, you must hear this. Yes, Glenda, she's here somewhere. You must hear this. If you're the director of the organization, you should be thinking 2 to 5 years ahead. And in the book, I also say, if you're not fundraising now for 2026, 2027, 2027, 2028, if you're not fundraising now, you are in trouble. Because that short-sightedness, we will get by. Often you will, but there will come a crunch where government says we're withdrawing funding, or the lotto. Those who are applying for the lottery will know that the lottery has become far more stringent of late. Those days will come, so that's the message I want to get across.
And then building on that, beyond just sharing knowledge, what influence do you hope that the book will have on peer leaders and organizations?
I hope non-profit leaders and board members will read the book with an open mind. There are a few hard truths in there. The one which I find the most hilarious is this thing in non-profit organizations where the director or the chairperson of the board gets a specially allocated parking bay. Right? If you want the best parking in the plot or in the building, simple, get there first. But we have this old way of practicing where there's certain beliefs that certain things must happen or must be in place. So the example of if you want the best parking in your complex, get there first, is one of those tongue-in-cheek comments, but which are so true. And there are 105 lessons, as I say, that have been learned through bitter experience.
Now, I think many of us will know, not me personally, but many people will know that writing a book is no small task. Were there any unexpected challenges along the way, whether in structuring the content or gathering insights or just finding the time to write the book? And if so, how did you overcome these?
Look, time is always an issue. If you're a director of a non-profit organization, you know that you are fully stretched, not for 9 till 5, but way beyond that. Osman dear, I know she works late into the night because that's in the nature of the work and of the passion. There were no real obstacles, but I did have tremendous support from Jessica Blom, who edited it for me, and so did Claire Pierce edited, and then all my colleagues were supportive. We're giving away the book at no cost, and the Centre for Early Childhood is bearing that cost. And our general manager, who manages all our finance, is Ros Witboy. She was happy with that. So it was a fairly smooth process, simply because there was a good support system. No single author ever writes a book. You've always got support somewhere.
So I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about the structure of the book itself and some of the choices that you made while putting it together. There are, as you say, 105 valuable insights packed into the book on NPO leadership. If you were to highlight just 3 lessons that stand out to you personally, which would they be and why?
Okay, the 3, I want to read the 3 to you, and you'll read it when you get the book. But there's a message in each of them. I think the first one of the lessons is just keep swimming. And those of you who watch Finding Nemo will know exactly what I'm speaking about. Let me read it to you. When times are tough, volatile, uncertain, complex, confusing, and ambiguous, we have to follow the suggestion of Dory, the animated blue tang fish who gets separated from her parents as a child and spends her time swimming in search of her parents. And then in brackets I write, watch the film Finding Nemo. You must watch that. Strategically, it's a strategic movie. As she grows up, that's Dory, as Dory grows up and searches for her parents, she learns about purpose, persistence, perseverance, and the importance of family and friends. When leading a non-profit organization, as with Dory, just keep swimming. And I think that's the message. There are going to be days where you're on a high. There are going to be days when you're on a low. Unfortunately, the low days are more than the high days. Just keep swimming. Keep going forward. You know, it's like the guy who runs the Comrades Marathon. You know, we've got one sitting in front. The guy who runs the Comrade Marathon, you get to 1 kilometer, you get to 10, you get to 15, and soon you're in the 70s and the 80s and you reach the 90-kilometer mark. Just keep going. It is not an easy task to run a non-profit. Just keep going. The second one is about organization culture. A number of management consultants, leadership gurus have said culture eats strategy for breakfast. You may have heard that. If your organization culture is right, simple things like you know what you're doing, you're at work on time, there's discipline in the organization, we give of our best. Those cultural behaviors are the foundation for a successful organization. If it's every person does their own thing, why must we stick to the central theme? Why must we stick to our mission? If you don't have that, you don't have an organization. And I've worked in organizations which has been torn apart with 4 or 5 groupings all doing different things. So the second big lesson or favorite of mine is ensure you've got a top-class organization culture. And the third one is read. Just read. You know, Nelson Mandela said that, he's on record as saying that not a day goes by that he does not read. If we want to keep up with what is happening in the world, we must read. I read before I get to work in the morning. The business day, I've gone off the Cape Times, which is now known as the Iqbal Survey Times. It's all about him. But I read ferociously, and my colleagues will attest to that. And then let me give you just one example of how it can be of value to your organization. How many people in this audience know about the huge company in South Africa that has been fined 101 million rand for collusion? Does anybody know about it? Okay, nobody reads Business Day. Now the twist in that tale, and why it's important for non-profits, the competition board has fined this company, based in KZN, 101 million rand. And the fine is as follows: 1 million rand payable to the National Treasury. And this company has to set up a 100 million rand corporate social investment fund to fund non-profits. Nobody here knows that. We have to read. If we read, we pick up these bits of information. So in the Sunday papers over the next month, there will be a call for proposals from this company for funding to the value of 100 million rand. And it's those directors and leaders of organizations that have read about it who will be first in line to access that funding. That's just one example. But reading is so critical, and I think every non-profit director must be doing it.
Absolutely. One of the unique design elements of the book is the blank space under the text on each page. Was this an intentional choice? And if so, what was the reasoning behind that?
Yes, when you get the book, you'll see that each of the 105 lessons is about a paragraph or 2 long, and then the rest of the page is blank. That's not an accident or a design fault. That's purposefully done for you to contemplate and think about that lesson and write your own story underneath. So, for example, when it comes to the lesson on read, right? You must read more to stay up to date. Write your own feelings about it. This guy's speaking rubbish. This is nonsense. Or, hell, I must read more. Or subscribe to Business Day and Financial Mail. So that blank space is there to help you crystallize your thinking and to write down action points around that lesson. So it was on purpose, not a design fault.
Now, of course, and sort of linked to that, of course, theory is one thing, but practice is another. And I think when you were my lecturer and when we lectured together, we would always talk about how forward-thinking and how phenomenal our policies were, but how the implementation was our stumbling block. And so, can you maybe give us an example of how you've applied one of these lessons from your book in your own leadership at Success Early Childhood Development?
Yes, I think the most appropriate one is around funding. And one of the things I've established in the organization, we are 25 people, and we've never had a fundraiser. We raise about 18 million rand a year. That's what we need to raise to operate. We've never had a hardcore fundraiser, so to speak. We've had somebody who pulls fundraising together. But I looked around the organizations and I saw all these talented young people. Yushra, Zena, Jessica, Roz, not so young. We've worked together 37 years, and I was about 5 when we started working. She was about 30. So we've got a team of about 7 or 8, 9 talented people. And I thought, how can we use the talents of these young people to get involved in fundraising? For 2 reasons. One, to raise more funding for the organization, but they're not going to be around forever. They're going to go on and head up big organizations themselves. And to give themselves more currency, they're going to need fundraising skills. And if they can say to a prospective employer, I raised 15 million rand, etc. So we got together, we meet once a month, and we've now got a team of 8 or 9 people who are doing the fundraising. So they do the research, they do the approach, they do visits, and one pair of them sitting in front of me here, Jessica and Yushra, have probably raised several million rand off a zero base. Now, that was one of the applications, or one of the implementations. Look internally for the talent. You've got the talent that's sitting there in front of you. I couldn't turn the 2 of them down if they came to me for funding. And it takes the load off you as the CEO, as the director, but it also gives the organization a better chance. So they will confirm if you think I'm lying. We are now fundraising for 2026, 2027, 2028. We know what our targets are for each of those years, and that's the target we've set, plus probably 10%.
Looking back, writing a book often brings up reflections about what was included and what wasn't. Are there any topics or insights you didn't include that, in retrospect, you feel should have been into the book?
Yes, the big one is, I've just read a book written by Alan Clayton, who some people may know of. He's probably one of the world's leading fundraisers, and he's written a book called Great Fundraising Organizations. Please don't buy it, it costs just on 1,000 rand. But luckily Ross gave me permission to buy it. And he talks about, we all have a vision, a mission, we all have goals, objectives, and that sort of thing. But he says that the trend going forward should be, or the question donors should be asking is, not what is your mission, what is your vision, but what is your ambition? And the difference meaning that often we phrase our work in, we would like to train 100 people in Lavender Hill. He's saying in this book that your ambition should be far more ambitious, and it must be unattainable. It must be something like remove gender-based violence from the planet. Right? Or your ambition should be every young child has a full early childhood development program before grade R. So if you look at the subtleties of it, your ambition is far bigger than what you as a single organization can do. But in designing that ambition, and we're going to be doing this exercise over the next 2 or 3 weeks, you're telling the world why you exist. And the reason for your existence must be to eradicate gender-based violence, to ensure every child passes grade 12, to ensure that every old age pensioner gets a pension. It must be this big, huge ambition, and I only read that after the book was printed, but it's something which I think I'm going to be preaching for several years ahead. We can change the world if only we have ambitions big enough.
Eric, you'll know that leadership doesn't happen in isolation. You've been your key influences in shaping your perspective on leadership in the non-profit sector.
Oh, there are many, some of them in this room. Professor Mandla Shabalala, who was my master's thesis supervisor, and he was chairperson of Cape Mental Health Society, really instilled in me that you can do it. You know, whenever I came to you with my thesis chapters, I would say, I'm not quite sure about this. And he would say, nonsense, you can do it. Professor Jonathan Jansen, who teaches us, do not be scared to say unpopular things. Right? If you think government has done something wrong, or a politician has done something wrong, open your mouth, do not be scared. The late Daniel Pikes, who together with Ross and myself started the Center for Early Childhood Development, taught me to have faith. I went overseas with him on a British Council scholarship one year. We were staying in Manchester, we wanted to go to London, and I did the typical thing. Where are we staying? What's it costing us? What time is our train? And he was so cool. He said, don't worry, have faith. So Daniel taught me to have faith. And we have to have faith, I think. And then my colleague Ros Witboy sitting down there. Ros, I hope I don't embarrass you. She's got no tolerance for jargon. So nothing about space or binary or hockey stick growth. All those, and you'll see in the introduction I say this. She's got no tolerance for excuses, jargon, and for not getting the work done. So she's influenced me as well. And then of course, everyday people influence you. I've got an 11-year-old granddaughter who knows what she's going to be doing in Brisbane in the year 2032. Yes, she's going to be swimming for South Africa in the Olympic Games. She's 11. And she knows this. How many of us adults can say that we know what our ambition or our ultimate goal is? So these people have all influenced my thinking. And then I read a lot. Particularly Malcolm Gladwell, which most people here have written. I've become addicted to YouTube videos. Warren Buffett. I want to know, why is he the richest man or the second richest man in the world? And I'm not. So there's so much, you know, we live in the information age. There's so much information we can get. There's no excuse for not knowing how to draw up a 3-year budget. There's no excuse for not knowing which donors fund early childhood development in which province and how much do they fund. That's all available. And I think we haven't lived in a time as ripe as now for taking our non-profits forward, because government is basically messing up. Without a doubt, tomorrow is going to be another war when the finance minister announces either a VAT increase or no VAT increase, but no increase to the social relief of distress grant. And there's going to be another war in Parliament.
Now, of course, leadership comes with its fair share of challenges and learning moments. Looking back at your time leading CECD, what are some of the mistakes that you've made, and what have they taught you?
There are too many to tell you, firstly, but the biggest one has been, and my colleagues will nod their heads when I say this, tolerating incompetence and deceit for too long. There was a case where a number of employees were not performing, and my colleagues, my trusted colleagues, were telling me, keep your eye on this, and I didn't listen. I allowed this wound to fester until that boil burst, and I had to step in. So I think the biggest lesson I haven't learned, but have now learned, is not to tolerate. You know, you give people an opportunity, you make suggestions, you give them warnings, but there comes a time when you have to put your foot down in the interest of the bigger organization. And I've been a bit slow on that. Jessica's nodding her head, I hope. Michaela certainly will be nodding her head.
Yes, I am. Yes.
Thank you.
Now, something that really stands out about the book is that you've chosen to make it freely available, which is quite unusual. I think most authors aim to sell their books and earn a profit. So this is quite a different approach that you've taken. What was your reasoning behind doing this?
A little bit of imposter syndrome. Who would buy a book that I wrote? Who would pay for a book that I wrote? And that's genuine. But I also think that we have to share knowledge, information, and lessons learned. And I'm a great believer, and the child gauge comes out at no cost. It's a brilliant book. Comes out at no cost. The Trialogue CSI handbook comes out at no cost. It's brilliant, full of information. Bernard van Leer Foundation put out all their publications at no cost. So I thought it's our payback time. We've been very fortunate with donor funding. As I say, 18 million rand a year. At our 30th birthday party, I told people it took us, in our first year of functioning, we raised 10,000 rand in the first year. We now raise 10,000 rand every hour. So in the hour and a half every year, we would have raised 15,000 rand in some way. So it's a way of giving back and saying to people, here's a book, it costs you nothing, but still value it. Read the content and implement it. And so, by the way, when you leave, please don't leave without a book.
And then, so in saying that as well, what is the best way that someone can get a copy if they aren't able to be here today?
On the way out, people can pick up a copy, but also if you've got NPO leaders, directors anywhere, ask them to phone my office or to turn up. They can get, we had 500 printed, and we're going to distribute about 70 today, and then we're going to mail, and this is where strategy comes in. We're going to mail, courier, to every one of our donors a copy of the book with a cover letter, and without disclosing tactics too much, that is part of the fundraising strategy. Because, let me just backtrack a little bit. In the early days, when it was difficult to raise funding, myself and Ross put our heads together and we thought, how can our funding proposals be different? How can they stand out so that donors will select them first? And we came across the brilliant idea, I don't know whose it was, but we said, every donor gets a proposal with a cover letter, and that letter is on white paper. Let's make our letterhead and our print paper green. On the strategic thinking that if a donor had 10 proposals in front of them, 9 was on white paper, 1 was on green. They would read the green paper first. And 30 years later, we're still here and well endowed. So it worked. So we're giving it away as a contribution to the sector, hoping that people in the sector will read it and will implement it. If there's any director, please spread the word. We're going to be we've secured one radio interview, but we're trying to secure more radio interviews to get the message out there, and people can come to our office and collect it.
That's really wonderful. And then before we wrap up, I'd like to hear about what's next for you. Has this writing experience sparked an idea for another book, or do you have any other projects in the works?
Yes, I think I'm a frustrated author because I've got 3 or 4 books going at the same time, and they're all in different stages and versions. But the 3 that I want to do is, and Frank Judy will know about this because I do this lecture for him every year, twice a year. It's a book called It's Vuvuzela Time. And my colleagues will tell you why Vuvuzela time is important. Every time that we raise money and it comes through, then I've got a red Vuvuzela in my office. And we walk around the building blowing this Vuvuzela all the time. This is genuine. The last time we got funding, I didn't blow it. And I got shouted at by my colleagues. I didn't blow the Vuvuzela. So it's a series of lessons on fundraising. Simple things like donors are actively looking for good projects. You don't need to worry. If your project is good, donors are looking for you. So that's the one. Then, at our 10th birthday, I promised a 10-year book. Never happened. On our 20th birthday, I promised a 20-year book. Never happened. At our 30th birthday, I promised a 30-year book. This has to happen. I'm not sure what decade, but I want to write up the 30-year history. Very few organizations have written up the history. Tahiti has got a book that Jane Evans wrote, Grassroots has got a book that Jenny Rickards wrote, and 1 or 2 other, FCW, Rita Wan's here. He's written, I think, 2 books on the history of FCW. Those stories are so important because you learn from it. In your writing, you learn from it, but also others can learn from it. So I had a meeting yesterday with Claire, or the day before, and we put the structure together, which is more than what we did for the 10th or 20th anniversary, but a 30th year book. And then the third one is something that my daughter Sarah got me to do. She said, "Dad, write some life lessons for me, please." And I started scribbling them down. So I want to write a book on life lessons for early career professionals. Simple bits of advice, like if your salary is X, spend X minus 30%. Simple bits of advice. So those are the 3 that are in the pipeline.
That's not really exciting. And then as we wrap up, is there anything else that you'd like to share? Perhaps just a final reflection, or on your journey, or a key piece of advice for imperialism?
Yeah, something that I learned. I've just read a book by a young guy who was a rugby coach at UCT, but he was also an expert in leadership. And I want to do this by way of a question. What is 1 plus 1? Just tell me the answer, please. Most people think 1 plus 1 is equal to 2. Mathematically, they're right. But conceptually, 1 and 1 can be 3. How does it become 3? If you add value. Things like organization culture, vision, strategy, energy, and probably the most important of those, desire. If you can add culture, strategy, vision, and desire to your work, then 1 and 1 becomes 3. And the lesson there is it goes beyond the mathematical equation of 1 plus 1 equals 2. It's that added bit, it's that add-on that can make your organization stand out. And then end up like Gift of the Givers, Africa Ticken, all these wonderful organizations that are out there that are superbly run. And they're all around us. They're not only the big ones, there are numerous wonderful organizations doing wonderful work, both in the early childhood sector, but also in the general development sector. But those that excel are the ones who say 1 plus 1 is not 2. 1 plus 1 with added value can be 3. Thank you.
Eric, thank you so much for sharing your insights, your experiences, and your journey behind this incredible book. And it's really been inspiring listening to your leadership journey. And I'm just going to take 30 seconds while I have this platform just to say that it has been an enormous privilege for me to work under your leadership, to be taught by you, and to be mentored by you. And I never ever take for granted the time that you invested into me and the opportunities that you provided me with. And just as you've said a couple of times, as you've been sharing, I so appreciate how you always see potential in people and how you never put a cap on people who work under your leadership. That you, rather than put a cap on, you create opportunities for them to thrive. And so I value you and I appreciate you hugely. Thank you.
Thank you very much. On that, I have to disclose this publicly that yesterday I extracted a completion date for a PhD from Lauren. She gave me a date, and Lauren, I first lectured Lauren in about 2009. Walked into the class and there was this girl sitting up there. And we've had a long journey together through working for CECD, doing her master's, being on her appointment panel for her lectureship at UCT, where she outperformed 41 other applicants, including 4 PhDs. She got appointed. But she made a grave mistake of giving me a date. At 12:01 midnight, after that date, I will call her to say the immortal words, "Have you handed in yet?" So I will hold you to that. And it's been lovely seeing you and having you here. Thank you.
We're going to open the floor now to our audience for some questions. So if you have a question, please raise your hand, and please feel free to introduce yourselves and let us know who you are and who you ask.
I have a question. I don't think I need a microphone. Do you remember that you can also download the book on our website? Ebook. And would you like to tell everyone?
Yeah, sorry, I forgot about that. My technology skills are on a scale of 1 to 10. My technology skills are about -3. No, that's not right. I've got a very good tactic for technology. It's called Claire. Come on. Yes, it's going to be turned into an ebook. I'm just waiting for the designer to make it that, and then it will go worldwide. Again, at no cost.
And we'll send out the notice once it's online.
No, I don't know if you can hear me, but Eric, you promised us a memoir. So more than 30 years, right from the beginning, from where you lived in Woodstock, all of that.
Yeah, that memoir has been written, but at this stage it won't get through the Publications Control Board. Let me just give you 2 instances. I failed grade 8. In fact, 3 instances. I failed grade 8. My mock matric mark for maths was 8%. And I got excluded from university for failing 2.5 out of 4 subjects. I passed industrial sociology, which everybody passed. Jessica even passed that. And I passed statistics 1A. So all that's in that memoir, but there are parts in there that's not for family sharing, let alone public sharing. But it will come, it will come. When I hit 45, 50, I may write it.
Yes.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. Someone from Social Development Institute and Capacity Building. And that, Prof, thank you so much. Also, congratulations. I think your book comes into a very special period in this sector, especially if we look to the registration process of non-profit organizations. And I think the reason why it went wrong in these organizations is exactly because of the fact that our organization, the leaders in the organizations don't have this knowledge. And so being involved in the capacity building of these organizations in the province, definitely I can see how this book can be used in a practical way to further build the capacity of those organizations, and I will definitely make use of it. Thank you so much.
Just an ad for Solvin. If you've got any problems with your MPO registration, that man solves it immediately on the spot. We've got problems with the lottery. There's no synchronization between CIPC. Shaking your head. Yeah. They've got it as well. Our CIPC registration and our DSD registration are not syncing, so the lottery will not even consider the proposal from us, which is due on the 31st of March. Salvan gave me the answer within a few minutes, so thank you for that. There's one public servant that works.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Eric, always skelm and slide. The reason I'm saying that, tomorrow is budget time. En jy bring die boek uit net so voor budget time. Clever. Very clever. That's why I'm saying, lekker skelm and lekker slide. Thank you, Eric. Thank you for being the first director to be able to write such a book. We've got many stories to tell, but I'm looking forward to your book. And I just hope the book is written in a font that I can read it.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Eric, for leading by example. And I know I've also worked in the NGO sector, and most of the challenges I see about client leadership becomes hidden as the main problem, but yet it is the main problem. Just a simple question, in a little bit how I know you. You are such a committed family man, you are an academic, and then you lead an NGO. How do you strike a balance?
By waking up at 6 a.m., reading the business day, which gets delivered to my door, and if the dog hasn't chewed half of it, I manage to read it in about 10 minutes. And then working all the way through to late at night. And I think where that came about was during doctoral studies. Elizabeth van Beek knows, Lauren knows, those doing doctorates at the moment. Your life only starts at 9 p.m. when you work on that. And it gets in your blood. But also, working with the 24 colleagues I've got, 25 with me, is so inspiring. They're talented, they're bright, they're sharp, and they're committed. And seeing that drives you. So, Dr. Chigunda, who was a colleague of mine at UCT, you get inspired by the young people that you work with. You know, the young people get bad press. They get told they're this, they're that, they're that. We've got stars in this country. We've got brilliant young people who are building the country that our generation messed up.
The business days of fixing. Okay, so I have two. My name is Charlotte. I work at the Sozo Foundation in Vryheid. I have two questions, Eric. My first one is, this book is about leadership and for other organizational leaders to read. But do you think it could also be a benefit for those that work in a non-profit on how to be led? Because I think that is also a challenge, especially when you're a young working professional, you enter the NGO sector and you don't really know what a job in the real world is like and you don't know how to be led. Does this book also benefit people in their careers?
Yes, it can benefit anybody who reads it. You know, it's simply a collection of lessons, and some of them may not be an issue for you, but others will be. So, no matter what your ranking is in the non-profit sector or even in government, it's basically lessons in life. I've just applied it to the non-profit sector because that's the sector I know best. But yes, anybody could read it. In fact, I'm cheeky enough to be sending it to the presidency so that he can read it.
Yeah, and then this, my last question was, so I know you like to read and write everything down and you hate technology, but some people don't like to read and they love technology. Have you ever thought about life beyond a book and how else this can access other people, like a podcast, your own YouTube channel, just for those that don't maybe enjoy reading as much as you do?
Yeah, look, the intention was to film this as well, but we didn't get that together. The next option is a podcast, and I've been asking one of my colleagues to get the equipment so that we can set up either a YouTube channel or podcast, but do it professionally. That's a huge, great growth area. It's not that I hate technology, I'm just totally incompetent at it. But that communication and that sharing of information is critical. You know, the days of, these are our funders, this is our program, these are our ideas, those days are gone, they're long gone. And the level of sharing now in the early childhood sector is enormous. And that can only do the sector very well.
Thank you, Prof. Just wanted to, I believe you're a real gem to the sector, and especially the way and the generosity in which you share your leadership for all of us. I just wanted to thank you. Very excited to read your book. But I wanted to find out from you, was there a moment in your 37 years of nonprofit leadership where you hit a crisis or a pivotal moment, something that changed you? How did you maneuver that? I assume there is at least one.
Well, yeah, not really a crisis, but we've got a situation at the moment when one of our prospective donors seems to think that we're too well endowed to be funded by them. And it's not a crisis, we'll get over it, but it's just a worry that there seems to be maybe it's just an individual thing, but there seems to be a thing that you must be struggling before you can be supported by a donor. And I don't think that's right. It's like punishing the competent or those that are performing. I hope I'm wrong. We'll know in the next 2 weeks or so. But yes, there've been lots of minor hiccups, but nothing to threaten the organization. You know, as non-profits, you have to be resilient. You need a thick skin. We got a bit of flack during COVID when we were part of a team, a group of non-profits that took government to court. Do you remember the social development minister wouldn't open ECD centers when the president opened the whole country? She said, no, ECD centers cannot open. Us, together with SA Childcare, with the wonderful Elizabeth van Niekerk as the lawyer, we took government to court. And no other organization in the country would come in with us. because I phoned a few of them. Now, there wasn't a crisis, but it was risky. The minister then cynically stopped the ECD subsidy. We went back into court the following day, and the court ruled that the minister has to pay those subsidies. And then something funny in legal terms happened. It became what is called moot, which I still don't understand. But basically the court said to the minister, you can't stop subsidies. So those have been 2 hiccups, but never a crisis. I don't think we ever want to get to the day when there is a crisis. And that'll be when the newspaper headline says, NPO in Cape Town shuts down because of funds. And we don't want to ever get to that point. Read one.
Yes, the publications on leadership in the NGO sector, your thoughts on why NGO leaders are selling their crown jewels, property assets, the likes of Catholic welfare, child welfare, CAPDA, and many others. We know that there's a funding crisis, but yeah, isn't that completely foolish?
Yes, I think it's completely foolish. I do not think there's a funding crisis. I really don't. I'll tell you why. The Trialogue CSR handbook, which comes out every December, has just shown 12.5 billion rand of CSI funding available. That's only CSI funding. Add foundations and trusts, say another 5 billion. Add government funding, say another 5 billion. That's 22, 23 billion available. The trick is you have to find it. And that's where the crisis is, to answer your question, that non-profits are not thinking strategically. They're thinking operationally, and they're not thinking strategically. And I want to repeat what I said earlier. If you're not thinking about 2026, 2027 now, you are in trouble. Because before we know it, it's going to be January 2026. And then you're going to wake up. You have to be, as an MPO leader, you have to be thinking 3, 4 years down the line. And some of the questions you must ask are difficult questions. What will we look like in 3 years' time? Will we still be in the early childhood sector? Will we be broadening out? What will our shape and size look like? So, selling off hard assets, unless they were bought for investment purposes solely. And some non-profits do that. You know, we bought properties purely for investment reasons. It's getting rental income at the moment. When we sell it, we'll sell it at 4, 5, 6 times what we paid for it. That's an investment decision. But when you're selling your core property and having sold it, you then have to go and rent. That's suicide. That is, that organization won't be around for much longer. And we've seen a couple of big ones. CAFTA is gone. CAFTA used to be iconic, 80 odd years old, gone. And they're closing left, right and center because of strategy and leadership, not because of funding.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Thank you for your question. We're going to have to end it there, but I'm sure you can ask your question after the session. I'm just going to thank a few people. Okay, I'm being told
So thank you for the time. Can you hear me? Yeah. I just want to note, Eric, in the type of writing and the nuances around just authenticity, right? In a rapidly changing world of AI and geopolitics, what is the core of your belief system that says that we can still be, that the human factor is still definitely value add for our sector and for us as humanity?
Two things. You know, if you look at the poverty, the vulnerability, and the neglect around us, we cannot sit and do nothing. We cannot pretend not to see what's going on around us. But in South Africa, I think we've got a huge advantage. What we've come through over the past 300 years, from the time when Van Riebeeck landed here and started messing the country up, we built the resilience. And Africans, and South Africans in particular, will not lie down and roll over and play dead. We've seen the flack that Trump is getting because of what he's done. And I think the country is going to be united, solidified around that. So South Africans have got a unique resilience, in my view. If you look at what the black African population has been through, in any other country there would have been mass slaughters. In this country, not. The black African majority fought against the white minority regime and triumphed. So there's a resilience which we've got and which non-profits have got, which will see them through. But they have to balance that resilience with wisdom. And wisdom is doing the simple things well. And if we do that, we'll triumph. We got over apartheid, we'll get over whatever is thrown at us because of people like in this audience. And South Africans are generally wonderful people. They're innovative, they're challenging, they are creative, and they are you.
Okay, so I want to do the thanks. The team at Inyathelo, thank you so much for your partnership and ensuring this seamless event. I don't see Ferial, Delinios not here. Ferial, Jacques, and Cassandra, thank you so much. To Lauren, thank you very much for leading such an insightful conversation. I'm sure we've all learned a lot. Okay, you can go in. That's just a token of our appreciation for taking your time today. And then to Najwa, I know she doesn't like being singled out, but I'm going to thank her for planning. She's our events manager, planning and coordinating everything today. I think it's a very well put together, very well done, Najwa. Okay, and then of course to all of you for taking your time out today to join us. Thank you so much for coming. There are still some eats left, so you're welcome to enjoy them after the session. As you leave, please remember to take a copy of the book. And if you ask nicely, I'm sure Eric will sign it. Thank you so much.